Hey everybody. So today I wanted to talk about the space configuration that we wanted to come in and look at putting the EG4 Life Power 4 batteries, the Victron inverter, and the additional equipment in. So to try and make it a little bit easier, I've made a semi mock-up of what's inside the Basecamp, of how I'm going to try and put this equipment in. And then I put that over to the side. The other thing that I'm going to look at using is these little anti-vibration blocks. Now, the problem that I run into with these is they're about a 3/4 inch thick 4x4 block. And so this is going to raise up the batteries off the ground. But I need to see, is that going to give me enough capacity without getting too high above the 17 inches that I have for the base. So let me take you into the Basecamp, especially for those who haven't seen it, and let you see the challenge we have with the space for the battery box and how all of this is going to try and fit together. Then we'll come back and we'll put the equipment in place to look to see how this will start lining up. So now I wanted to bring you inside the Basecamp. And so set up, show you how to get to the battery compartment, where we're going to try and put these new batteries, and the bit of the challenge we have. I've already removed the cushion off of the side here. And so I'm going to take you over and show you from the top the battery compartment, and then I've already removed the screws. I'm going to come in and show you the bottom of the battery compartment as well, and let you see how tight the space is and what the challenge is going to be for us to get in, get this reconfigured, realigned, and set up so that you can easily see where everything is going to go. So come on the journey with me. Okay. As you look at the table on the front bench, when you pull the cushion up, there's an opening for the battery compartment that you can remove. And when you come in here, you can actually see the top of the battery compartment. So it's about 17 inches high, and from the corners it's about 16 to 17 inches depending on the location, from the front of the board to the back wall. You have the terminals coming in from the battery box. You can see down in the corner the wiring I have for my BM712 battery monitor for the shunt. And then, let's see if you can turn this and see this. So that's going to be the smart controller, the MPPT 15035. But let's make it a little bit easier to see the equipment. So there's the door. When you remove these two screws, you can take the door out, pull the wall out. I've added an extra little switch here that I use for my tire minder so that I can get back in and turn it on and turn it off. You see cabling coming out of the floor. So this is going to be cabling coming from your 7-pin, coming back in from powering from a car, powering back to the equipment and connecting back into the panels. You have the two terminals coming in for the batteries, a box to hold the batteries in place. And if we peek right around the corner, you can see the BM712 shunt. You can see the blue box. That is the smart controller. At the top, you can see bus bars and what's happening there. So you see that it's a very tight space going from this far end back over to this other wall, which I can take down by removing that bracket that's back there in the corner. And we can come around and remove that wall and have this space coming back in here. But as my wife has told me, and as we're going through trying to maximize the space so that we're not losing any storage, you know, is definitely something that we want to be able to do. So when I go back inside, I'll show you a mock-up of this side wall over to the side where you see the blue smart controller, the back wall, and then I'll have it open from where this wall is and that wall is so that we can look at what it's going to take to reconfigure the space. Now when I come to do the work inside the trailer, I'm actually probably going to take the bench out. So underneath the bench you can see that there are brackets holding it in place as well as with the leg. And so I will look at removing those brackets, taking the bench out. I'll probably have to take the table out as well. So there's some screws that you can see that you can use to remove the table. That'll give me room to come in and bring those heavy batteries back inside after I've configured and opened this back up and put those in. But one of the other challenges I'm going to run into is, more than likely, and you'll see it in the video when I put the batteries in place, the batteries are going to come all the way up to this line, so the wiring coming in here will probably have to be relocated over to the side, unless I can take the smart controller here and put it somewhere on top of the battery. So all those to be determined as we go through the space, but that's the challenge of trying to figure out how to put these batteries in a super small space. Okay, so now that you've seen the inside of the Basecamp, let's take the batteries, the anti-vibration cushions, the equipment that we're going to put on top of the batteries with some sort of shelf, the inverter, and start lining up to see what's going to fit inside of the blue tape, and no more than the 17 inches high that I need on the side. So we'll see if we can put this together. Okay, the batteries fit within inside the blue tape, roughly. So I've got them sitting on top of each other. There's nothing holding them down, so I do have some metal that I'm going to use as a strip, probably to use some sort of ratchet strap to bring and tie these down. I'll know I'll do it side to side, but I may also do it front to back. I've got to look to see which works best. What I wanted to really see in my little cardboard mock-up is I've built this about 17 inches off the ground, which is the height up to the bottom of the seat of the bench inside of the Basecamp. So coming off the batteries, I'll have a positive line that's going to come into a mega fuse. I'll tie that into the fuse, which will then connect into a disconnect, so I don't have it obviously hooked up. This disconnect will allow me to totally cut off power for the batteries back into the Lynx distributor. And I'll take the Lynx distributor and use this to connect the different pieces of equipment. I'll have wiring coming out of the inverter up to the Lynx distributor on this side. I'll have wires coming out of the Lynx distributor. I may come to this side. To make it simpler, because I'll need wires coming out of the Lynx distributor, coming back over to the rest of the equipment. When I'll have lines coming in from, and I'm using this box to simulate my solar charge controller, the MPPT. It's a little bit bigger than the blue solar that I have, but it's about the same height as the Lynx distributor. So as I come back and look at this, I'll be able to take wiring back to the solar charge controller. Today, it sits here, and so I've left some space initially on the side so that I can continue to leave the solar charge controller where it is, and make sure that that just stays there and connects it back into the Lynx distributor. So I just need to run wiring back over to this side, probably along the edge of the batteries, up against the wall to stay out of the way. Now, as I look at doing that, my other thought is I could move it right on top as well and try and simplify the wiring coming from the solar charge controller to the Lynx distributor, solar charge controller up to the panels, and I'm going to install a breaker switch as well so that I can turn off the connections coming from the charge controller back into the system. Also coming out of the Lynx distributor, I'm going to have connections back into the Servo GX, connecting the different Victron pieces of equipment and using it to help monitor what's happening on the system as a whole. Not sure yet if it's going to work with the battery management system or the BMS inside of the EG4 Life Power batteries, but we'll try and tie that back in, if nothing else, for the Victron equipment to make sure that I'm charging, getting the information back in correctly, to include the BM712 that you saw on the inside of the Basecamp. The other piece that I'll have is going to be the Orion DC to DC. It's going to take this and step down the 24 volts to 12 volts back over to the DC panel that's going to be on this side. And I need to take the wiring that comes back in. Now, what actually happens in the Basecamp is the wall here that the solar charge controller is on actually stops partway down, and there's an opening for wiring to go underneath, and it comes into the panel, the electrical panel, for the AC and the DC power there. So I need to run wiring for AC power from the inverter back over to the AC breakers, DC into the system here, step it down from 24 volt to 12 volt into the DC panel, bypass the converter that's already in the panel, because I have the conversion taking place inside of the Victron Multiplus already. And then I got to work on my wiring. As you see, I took one of the wires that came with the battery. This actually is only set to go for, I looked it up, 16 millimeters squared. It only goes up to 48 volts. I could use 2 of these and bring it into my fuse, for the A&L fuse, and then bring it into the side. But I'm probably going to replace that with 2-gauge wire and make sure that that fits in. So I got to build all my wiring coming in from the positive, the negative, into the link distributor, put the pieces of equipment together, and then I need to be able to figure out how to strap this down. But this is the general idea of how I'm going to take and put everything in here. Part of the challenge, if I measure the height, I wanted to use a piece of wood on top of this. One of our members actually used a piece of metal, which I think worked nice and clean. I thought, well, I've got a spare piece of plywood. It's about 1/2 inch thick. But the challenge from the floor up to just with this cushion, top of the link distributor, is about 16.5 inches. And if I put a 1/2 inch board that I'm gonna bolt down, I'm actually bumping up against the bottom of the bench. And so I don't know that that's gonna work. So I've gotta do one of 2 things. Either take the vibration pads out, lower this down by 3/4 of an inch, then I can use it, or get some sort of metal that I can either VHB tape, very high bond tape, put the metal on top of this so that it's not connecting metal to metal with the battery, and build an insulation layer underneath it, set that and put everything on top, or cut a piece of wood that I use the VHB tape to hold down to the battery, and then put those pieces in place. So that's the game plan of how I'll put this together. Short on time this week, coaching softball. The girls made it to the state playoffs, so we're going through that. But I will start going into the weekend wiring everything up now that I've got some extra wire in, putting all the lugs on, all the equipment, getting the batteries fully charged one by one, and then coming back and looking at taking it apart after I do the wiring and putting in the base camp. But I'll come back and film another video of getting the wiring together, how everything connects together, making sure that the Victron is working well. And I'm actually going to power the Victron off of the 110 outlet on the wall. So I'm going to bring that in, set the Victron to go no more and pull no more than 10 amps. It is a 20 amp fuse inside the house breaker, so that'll keep us well below the limit for anything else that I plug in here. And I just need to trickle charge the batteries. One's at about half full, one's about 3/4 full, according to the front panel. So hopefully that makes sense. It gives you an idea of the space configuration and challenges. Once I get this inside, I'm gonna need to take that wall that I took down, put it back, and potentially take another board or wall going this direction to segment out the Victron without taking away too much of the space that my wife wants to make sure that I don't lose as we go through and do this. Okay, hope this is helpful. Any questions, let me know. Hit like, subscribe, and look forward to seeing you in the next video.